So anyway, my name's Gary Woodruff. I do installs, riggings, tournament stuff. But I'm from New Hampshire. Occasionally come out to Buffalo area, rig a few boats. This week I'll be doing Joe Fonzie's boat again. I do Joe's every time he gets a new boat, I'll do it. And this time we're going to be adding another Livescope, or actually another active target system to it. And I'll show you the pole we're using later on. And my buddy in Puerto Rico keeps pinging me. So if you hear pings, that's what that is. So.
Smart, he's in Puerto Rico.
Yes, well, he's told me how much nicer it is there. He has to keep his salt and all of his supplies for cooking in jars. Otherwise, it turns into mush because of humidity. So anyway, so let's get going on this. What I want to do is talk about a lot about Livescope, or live system, live sonar. Okay. I'm a Lowrance guy, so I know Garmin has got a great unit out. Lowrance has one out. Humminbird just upgraded their stuff. Lowrance actually has two out. There's a new lower end one called an Eagle Eye, and that's like $1,000 for everything. The signal is pretty good on that. It doesn't have the same coverage as the more expensive units, and it's not networkable. Okay. So I'm going to talk about installation planning a little bit, rigging it, testing it, and setup. And so the installation planning, when you're putting these in your boat, okay, you got to figure out where or how many live sonars you're going to run. Okay, most boats that I've rigged generally have up to 2, but I'd say the majority of the boats will just have 1. They are expensive. You know, you're talking $1,500–1,600 for the live module, and then you got to have a unit to go with that, and that unit is going to run you at least $1,000 and up. So unless you got big wallets, shall we say, you got a problem. So you also have to look at how you're going to use it. Okay, most people that you'll see on these screens, they're running what's called forward mode. So you're looking out ahead of the boat. Okay. That video I was showing you, it was looking at the school in forward mode. Okay. There's also down mode. So if you like jigging, drop shotting, you can put it in down mode and look under the boat, and actually with a 128 or 155 degree angle, and actually get quite a bit of coverage looking straight down. Okay. And there's also something called scout mode. I think it's called landscape or something in Garmin, but basically where it's horizontal, so you're looking at very wide. And that's pretty handy if you're looking behind your boat and you're, say, trolling and you got outriggers out. That's one good use for that. I also have buddies who use that for early season jerkbaiting. So if you're you can look out in that mode and you can actually see fish swimming. Throw your jerkbait out, watch it splash the surface, and see if they're coming towards it. And I'll say one thing. I mean, I've always loved video fishing with old standard sonar, and I always got a kick out of that. But this is even better because now you can look away from the boat, and you can throw your bait over there, and you watch your bait go down. You watch the fish go with it. It's a rush, but it turns it from pure fishing into more hunting. Okay, and that's part of the discussions going on today of everybody complaining about forward facing sonar. Okay, so then once we've figured out how we're going to use it, we need to figure out where we're putting this module. Those modules have to be located, or should be located in a really dry area. They need to be, out of the weather type thing. And you have to have good heat or airflow around them. Okay. Then figure out where your units are going. If you have them on the network like you can with the Garmin and with Lowrance, you can essentially use the sonar output on any screen in your boat, as long as they're all networked together. I use that quite a bit for if I'm guiding. I'll be sitting there with the live system on the bow. Clients are on the bow. I'll sit at the console and look, and I'll say, okay, throw over here or throw over there. Or if I got a buddy who's sitting in the back there and he gets bored, I'll just put that on there to keep him happy. So, and then we got to worry a lot about transducer mounting, and that's a lot of the talk is about how you mount that transducer. Okay, pole mounts are super for that reason. So, rigging. Okay, your most critical thing is getting power to these live modules. Okay, You've got to get clean power to it. You've got to get sufficient power to it. That means you've got to run decent sized wire to it. You have to have a good battery system that runs all day. Otherwise, as that voltage degrades in the battery, so does your signal quality. Okay, very, very important. Also, by keeping that battery up freshly powered, which is a reason I use lithiums, but it will actually continue to give you a really good signal throughout the day, and you won't notice the degradation. So, okay. Wiring, again, I mentioned that briefly. When I'm running power to a module, I'm running 8 gauge. Okay, 8 gauge marine wire. I've had lots of discussions with people. Oh, why can't I run 10 gauge? Why can't I run this? You can, okay, if you're running about this far from your voltage source, okay. Most of the runs we do will be running up to the bow or up to the console. You're talking 8 to 22 feet of wire. That's a significant voltage drop. Yes, 8 gauge will carry you 120 amps roughly of 12 volts with minimal drop. But what I'm looking at is that voltage drop per foot in that cable. Okay, I'd like to be able to get, if I'm showing 12.6 at my battery, I want to have minimally 12.5 at the modules. Okay, and that just minimizes that voltage loss. Pulling wires, that's a whole game in itself. Okay, when you're putting these things in the boat, if you're putting it in a locker, can you get in and out of that locker? You might have to drill a few holes. So I've done that. I had to do that in a Lund boat where I actually had to put the battery in one of the bow lockers, Chris. And then, so what I did is then I had to drill through the plates under the deck and come across the console. Okay. And then module mounting. Okay. So power. One thing I do, I'm just going to lean here. Already sweat. Anyway, figure out how much power you need. I've got some charts coming up here to show a little bit of current draw, depending on how many units you have, what size units. Obviously, if you go to a 12-inch unit, it's going to draw more power than a 9-inch unit. Okay. If you put a 16 on there, you're drawing a whole lot more power now. Okay. These modules pull about 3 to 3.5 amps per hour. Okay. So you've got to have your battery capacity to be able to hold that. So that's one reason that I typically run a separate electronics battery. Okay? Because the last thing you want to do is be on the water. You go to have a great day of fishing. You caught thousands of fish or whatever, and you go to crank the big motor, and it goes, it doesn't go. Okay. So that's another reason I carry jumper cables, and I carry the little NOCO chargers. Okay. You got to have a backup plan, okay? Especially you don't want to get stuck in rough weather out here. You guys have been there, done that probably. What you want to do is fuse each unit, okay? So you got a fuse on the module itself. You got fuses on your screens, okay? And then what I do is that when I'm pulling my wire from the battery out, I'll put a circuit breaker there. It's an ignition-proof breaker, and I run out from that location. Okay, I believe that you fuse at the source and you fuse at the destination, and the reason being is that if that cable in the middle happens to short out for some reason, for example, a lot of these aluminum boats internal where you're pulling cable have a lot of rough edges. Over time, you're out in the water, everything's looking good, but your cables are rubbing up against that metal, the metal bracing inside, and it's now basically chafing your cable, which could either short it out or cut the cables. So just make sure you got breakers. Just save yourself rewiring the boat, which gets very, very expensive. Again, provide the correct wire size for your load. Okay. As I said, I typically run 8 gauge. And the reason I run 8 gauge is that, one, I don't have to worry about losing power. I think I'll show it later. I ran one boat. I had three 12-inch units on the bow, and I had 2 active target modules. So we're talking a significant amount of current going to the bow. So I ran all that, plus I ran a couple other odds and ends on that. So I used a 12-position fuse block. I use 8 gauge wire. I use a 125 amp hour battery. and that was also to run his 2 units on the console. So we had really 5 units on that boat. So you really have to plan for that. So, and if you're going to go to lithiums, make sure your charger is compatible. Okay. Now, I run Battleborns. At the time, Minn Kota did not provide the PCL version, which is a lithium compatible charger, but they had their PC version, their charger. It would work on an AGM cycle. Okay. So that the lithium battery I bought had a really good BMS or battery management system in it. Okay. And that made it compatible with, looks like a car battery. Okay. So I could use an AGM charger cycle for it. Okay. Just be aware of that. So, okay. So here's power consumption. This is kind of a typical boat. This is the same configuration I did on a Skeeter for a high school student. You know, a high school student's going to beat the crap out of us in live sonar, hands down. Okay. They've got the stamina. They play video games. Okay, this is a video game tool. But you can see with those 2 9-inch units, we had a network hub, and we had this sonar module, the active target module. It basically was pulling not quite 5 amps. Okay, so you take 5 amps, you're out how long? 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day. That's minimal capacity you need in your battery. And now you have to factor in some voltage loss over the day. So instead of what that would be, say 12 by 5, 60. So I would, say minimum 75 amps for a battery to run that for 12 hours. Okay, but that's just me. I tend to over-engineer than under-engineer. I've had long discussions with a buddy of mine who wants to use like a DeWalt battery, the 20-volt battery you have in your drill. And I'm looking at him like, I'm just shaking my head. Oh, it's cheap. It's this, I get this. It's like, okay, go right ahead. Not a good idea, but go right ahead. So, but let's look at the difference in current from these 9-inch units up to the 12s. Okay, so the 12s are now pulling 8.5 amps. Okay, I think that's 8. Yeah. I don't want to put the glasses on, but you can see because I went from a 9-inch unit to a 12, I'm pulling a lot more power. If I had, huh? Now that's the whole circuit. That's the whole circuit, yeah. Yeah, so that's more of a typical configuration. I mean, if you're going to put this on your boat, unless you're really budget constrained, you're going to try to get some 12s on sale, okay? And, Lowrance has instant rebates going on now. Garmin's always dumping 12-inch units, prior generations, but they all work with it. And what you'll find is as you get older, obviously your eyes go to crap. And what you want to do is have a biggest screen as you can so you can see the best resolution, the best detail in that screen, okay? And the other thing is that the bigger screens have more resolution on them. So it's kind of like you going from the old style analog TV that got signal out of the air, and you know how garbage that signal was. Now you go to a 4K TV, you can see the difference. That's the same thing of going to better screens with more resolution. The module themselves actually produces very good images. Can you see it on your screen? Okay. So, okay. What did I do? Hang on. There we go. I don't like this thing. Anyway, wiring. Okay. I've talked about basically getting good wiring. A couple things there is use marine grade wire. Don't use anything else. Don't use copper stranded. I got a buddy who wires with house wire. I look at him and tell him what an idiot he is, okay? And he knows it because I keep repeating it. Just use the marine grade wire. 50 feet of this duplex wire is it's down to $88 right now on Amazon. Okay. At one point I was buying it at 120 per 50. I now buy 100-foot spools and not worry about it. So, and the other thing is use marine grade connectors. You want heat shrink connectors so that when you crimp it, you can shrink it down. Now you have a completely waterproof connection of all the cables. You want to minimize any issues with corrosion or stray currents running around, okay? And I'll show you, I think I got pictures, whoop. No, I didn't put those. Okay, pulling wires, okay. One thing when you're pulling your wires, have slack. You know, if you need a 20-foot cable and you have a 20-foot cable, you probably should get a 25-foot cable, because you want to have a little extra on both ends, because believe it or not, these boats flex. They look like they're solid, but they move, okay? Just like an airplane wing. Airplane wings move when they fly. Okay, so you've got, if you have taut cables, as soon as you tighten it up, it's going to start chafing on you. Okay, so just a little extra cable. Okay, that's especially true in aluminums. I'll say my jury is out whether I want a rig or aluminum boat or a fiberglass boat. Fiberglass boats, when you pull cable, you're chewed up with fiberglass. You guys have done insulation, you know the feeling. But in aluminum boats, I end up with cuts because it slices. So I'm not sure. I almost think the cuts are better, because at least they'll heal up and they're not continually itching for days and days and days. So okay. So, yeah, just making sure I'm not missing. Okay, so when you're pulling, transducer cables. Okay, one thing about these transducer cables for the live transducers, they are very, very small gauge. Even though it looks like a big wire, there's about 20 or so wires inside of that. So you can imagine how small those internal wires are. If you use a zip tie and you cinch it down, well, you may as well just throw away a couple $100. No, I'm sorry, $1,000 for a new transducer. Okay, it gets be very expensive, because people have compressed the cable enough to actually cut the wires. So you've got to be very, very careful of that. Some people use Velcro straps or electrical tape. They work. I consider that a temporary thing if you don't have the right tool or right piece. Ranger, Nitro, and Triton, courtesy of Johnny Morris's empire, they actually have these molded pieces that go over your trolling motor that covers the cable up for you, okay, which makes it fairly nice to rig with. I prefer using something called a Hawkins component. It's a Hawkins cable clamp, and what it does is it puts the tie wrap underneath the cable, so there's zero stress on that cable. Okay, so all right. So here's some examples of the stuff, and if you guys are familiar, this is Angler's Choice in Spindale, North Carolina, from a couple weeks ago when I was walking around the short sleeve skirts. Not up here. Okay, but you can see they were using these tie wraps on the cable, and if you look closely at those cables, you probably can't see it from this picture. They're actually compressed a little bit. Okay, don't do that. This is the electrical tape method. Again, I'm not a fan of that. That work lasts about a year, then it starts coming off, then you got to redo it. Okay, I see a lot of dealers doing that, and I don't know if you've ever taken anything with electrical tape apart, but your hands will be gummy and black when you're all done, and the cables will be gummy and black when you're all done. So. And Chris knows somebody's boat I was working on. His name was Bobby, and they had this much cable wrapped in electrical tape, and it was an absolute mess. So, okay. And these are those shrouds I was talking about. Unfortunately, the only way you can get those is going to a dealer, a Nitro, Ranger, Triton dealer, and ordering them. And they're actually made for ghost trolling motors. This is a ghost right here. Okay, this trolling motor. And you can see it's two different shaft sizes. But the nice thing about that is the cable is not constricted at all whatsoever, and it just moves inside. But the one thing about it, you see the one on the left there, there's nothing on it. The one on the right at least has some electrical tape around it. I typically, if I use those, I'll add an additional zip tie around it, just to make sure that shroud doesn't fall off. I mean, they are very tight, but still they do fall off. Okay. And this is the Hawkins component here. You look very carefully, this is the cable. You see a zip tie there, but it goes underneath the cable. There's no pressure on that cable whatsoever. And the neat thing is that if you don't have the right cable length, for example, on trolling motors, you typically have to have a loop here. Okay. And if you don't have the loop exactly right, you can easily adjust it with that. Okay. You can get those either direct from Hawkins, or you can get them from Bass Fishing Electronics. What they are, if you're into bicycles, some of the bicycle frames don't have the guides for cables. Okay, 'cause they just didn't put them on there. And that's what these were originally intended for. So, and people also use them on motorcycles as well. So, okay. So, okay. So, a couple things about routing that transducer cable. Again, you want to route these cables away from your electrical noise if possible. Okay. So, for an older style trolling motor, which has the standard DC motor, okay, as opposed to the brushless stuff, what I typically do is I try to keep all the transducer wires away from that trolling motor cable as much as I can. Okay. For brushless, you don't have to worry about it because it's a different type of noise pattern, and it doesn't really interfere with the signal. So this is what I do for, say, an Ultrix trolling motor. You can see I got these cable clamps, and what I did is I drilled and tapped into the mount for the Ultrix, and this would be the same for a Fortrax, and any other ones are very similar mounting component. But also, if you look over here, I've got all my cables, the transducer cable actually looped away from that power cable. I put an EMI detector on that, and you can watch the signals just jump out of the roof and actually goes to unsafe levels. So again, you want to keep it far away as possible. Hummingbird transducers, some of the older ones, were not shielded. And what happened is that people complained, oh, I step on the trolling motor, boom, I'll lose my signal. And that's what was causing it, that EMI. Okay. So mounting. You want to have the mounting for the module, basically. You want to have it out of the weather. You want to have it so the cables are coming out either from the bottom or from the side. You don't want to have the cables coming out the top. I know it's a whole lot easier to plug cables in and out if it's coming in from the top, but where does moisture go? Moisture goes down the cable and it will get into your connectors. No matter how well you think you've sealed them up, they're not. Okay. If you come in from the bottom and you put a loop in your cable, so cable comes down, comes up, and just loops, your water's going to go to that drip area. So very, very important, especially up here. When we're in rough water, you're going to get wet. Okay, unless you got an 80-footer, but nobody has something that size. But you just want to minimize getting water into units, and you want to minimize the unit getting bounced around in your boat. Okay, so the modules, as I mentioned earlier, the Active Target 1, Active Target 2 from Lowrance, the Garmin Livescope module, which is a GLS 10. There's a couple of units without modules, the Lowrance Eagle Eye. That's why it's $1,000. And then the Hummingbird Live. And the Hummingbird Live, the thing about that, all these other transducers have a single cable. The Hummingbird stuff has two cables coming out. So you got a power cable and a transducer data cable. Okay. So typically what I do, I mentioned about where you want to put it. A lot of dealers, a lot of manufacturers will put it in the lockers. Okay, they think it's out of the way. The problem is that, to me, I don't care how big the locker is, it's never big enough. You've always got another life jacket to throw in there, more tackle to throw in there. You got more stuff to throw in the locker. Last thing you want to do is cover up the airspace around these modules. Okay, so what I typically do is I'll try to put it under the bow if I can. If I can't put it under the bow, I will then put it under the console. And by having it under the console, you're mostly out of the water, but you're out of weather, which is important, and you get really great airflow. Okay, so the other thing is that these modules, when you put them in, obviously you're going to need access to power. You need access to the network. Okay, so Ethernets are what these are running on. Okay, so this is a dealer-installed module, Active Target module in the bow of a Camus. Okay, and what they did, they just simply laid it in there and taped it down. I've done that mounting before. What I use like 3-foot long zip ties, and I zip tie to those tubes extremely tight. And I found, like, even after 2 or 3 years on Erie or Ontario or Champlain, especially Champlain because it's a different wave type, it's actually staying in place. But what I actually prefer to do, I'll show you here in a moment, is I will use this starboard material to mount everything on. Okay, this black material here. It's very, very rugged. I haven't yet to have a screw come out. And we took Fonzie's boat apart after 4 years. Everything was perfectly intact. Had not moved whatsoever. So in this situation here, I've got a fuse block. Okay, there's a solid state relay, but I can talk about that later. But the module itself is located on the left side here, and then this is a network hub right in the middle. Okay, the reason sometimes you have to run a network hub is that you got 3 or 4 units. Each unit may have 1 or 2 ports on it, especially lead FSs. They have 1 port. But the HCS series, the upper Garmin series all have 2 ports on it. You will run out of network connections. And I honestly do not like going from this unit to the module to this unit to the next unit to the next unit, which means you got to have all those units on to see it down at the end of the chain. Okay. If I have a network hub, as long as the network hub is turned on and that unit's connected to the hub, I see everything. Okay. So that I just prefer it that way. So,
How expensive is that? Oh, it's an expensive item.
$350. It's not bad. I wish it was about half that size. It's about the size of an active target module. Maybe, and I'm hoping that the next generation will have gigabit stuff. All these typical networks in the boats run 100 megabits. Okay, I've got a new port on the S3100 module, which is a sonar module for side scan. That's got a gigabit port on it, so I know it's coming. I just don't know when. I wish it was here now, but it's not. So, by the way, I'm a computer geek, so I like this tech stuff. So, anyway, so this is a view of a mounting situation where I have 2 modules in the bow. Okay, along with everything else. This is that 12-position fuse block I mentioned earlier, right here. But you can see there's plenty of space there to get airflow under it. This is run on, like, for example, on the Potomac River in 100-degree days, and he ran it for, well, we're running a 125 amp hour battery for his electronics. He ran 14 hours with everything turned on. So that can kind of give you an idea on what the lifetime you might expect. And it had 0 issues with overheating. So this is the rest of that module there. So what I did is it actually goes straight up into the bow, and there's a network hub, and there's a 12-position fuse block here. If you have a 6-position fuse block and you have 6 items, get a 12. Guaranteed, 100%. I need 7th or 8th. Okay, so just rig one time. Don't cheap out. This is the Garmin module. This is a GLS-10. And this situation, I mounted it vertically. This was inside of a center console boat, which is actually a saltwater boat. And we're putting an LVS 62 on there, which if you've seen 32 and 34s are about this big, right? The 62 is roughly that size. It's a lot bigger in my hand, a lot bigger. It's also $2,500 for the transducer, as opposed to $1,500 or $1,000. So. But this is in a saltwater boat. It's going to give him a range of roughly 500 feet out, okay, which is what you want, because this boat is most likely down right now sitting down the Keys. I actually rigged it over here near Lockport a couple years ago. But you can see what I did on this situation. I mounted it vertical. That when I attached all the cables, they came out with a little droop on them for letting water come off. So there's nothing around this as well. The other thing I want to mention to you, and this is something a lot of people do not do, and this will greatly improve your signal for the live system. See this black wire right here? This is a case ground for that unit, for that module. Okay? And what I've seen is by attaching that case ground to either your battery ground or to a boat grounding system. This boat actually has what I call a bonding system, so there's an external anode like on your motor. Okay, it's a sacrificial anode. And what it'll do is actually give you a lot better signal. It'll clean your signal up too. Without you having to do anything. It's just running one extra wire. Not a whole lot to it. Typically it's like a 10 gauge wire. And so this is that.
From the battery, I'm sorry, that's from the battery up you're running?
Well, for example, on that first one, they had the twin units in the bow. I ran the case grounds to that fuse block, to the ground on that. So it's But on this situation, because this boat had a bonding system in it, we actually attached this green wire up here into that sacrificial anode that went external to the hull. Okay, so he's all set for salt water. So now we're not going to have corrosion on the transducer, and we're going to get much better signal. Okay, it's just insurance. And on Garmin units, which is what this boat is, these other wires here, one was for the VHF radio, and the other was to the 2 console units. Okay, so, all right. Transducer mounting. This is the biggest variable in the whole live sonar system. Okay, where are you going to mount that transducer? So, but what I want to show you first, and this is where I've seen a lot of issues with people. Oh, I installed and I broke the mount. You see these screws here coming out of the back side? This one's in a little bit, this one's in a lot, and this one's sticking out. That tells me there's uneven torque or tension on each one of those pieces, corners of that bracket. Okay, there's a good chance you can break that bracket, and now you're pissed because it broke. But it's your fault, because what you want to do is have even depth of those screws coming out of the back. The way I do it is I'll tighten it up initially, get them all pretty much the same, and I'll go through with an X pattern. I'll do this side, that side, this side, that side. And just keep that just like you do a tire when you put the nuts back on the tire. Okay? It will save you some issues down the road. There was early complaints with the Lowrance active target mounts. I keep breaking my mount. Well, yeah, you will do that. That Camus boat from the dealer came in that way. It was broken because they didn't tighten it properly. So just save yourself. You don't need to make it super, super tight. You need it 100% snug so it doesn't move in rough water. Okay. So, but it doesn't have to be glued on there essentially. All right. Okay. So let's look at the mountings. Okay. There's a lot of options here. We can go on the trolling motor shaft. Okay. We can go on the trolling motor itself, which put it on the head, which is what the video shown earlier. We can have a transom mount, so it can go back on your transom, and we can go on a pole mount. So this is one where we mounted the transducer. This is actually my boat. When I put it on there down in North Carolina, I don't even know where I am anymore. But basically, this is the mount itself. Okay, cable comes out the back side. I've got a lot of questions. How come I don't get very good signal? Well, I've seen this, and I'll show you a picture in a moment, where this cable is on the wrong side of the transducer. It always comes out of the back towards the stern of the boat. Okay, otherwise you're not going to get your signals right. Okay, you're not going to get a very good signal. So the other thing is that what you want to be careful of for alignment purposes. This alignment here, vertical piece, should be perpendicular to the trolling motor body. Okay. You don't have to get it within 1/10 of a degree. Train your eye and train the way you use it to know where your transducer is. Because one thing that's almost a given, your transducer is going to move on you at some point. You're going to hit a bump while you're trailing over here. You're going to hit a bump in the water, and it's going to slightly move. And now you're going to be all upset because my arrow doesn't line up anymore. Okay. Fortunately, you guys are on the ear here, and you can see in the water pretty good. You can usually look down and see where that transducer is, and you know where it's pointing. Okay. So, how come it bumped? There we go. This is on an Altera mount, and this is Joe's old boat from, I don't know, I think it's one of his old 621s. And what it does is this mount actually mounts on the very base of the motor, and this kinky coily cable there is what the transducer cable runs in. So as you slide that trolling motor up and put it in the water, that whole cable system moves with it. That type of trolling motor, to be honest, is a pain in the butt to get a transducer to. Okay. What we eventually ended up doing, and I'll show you in a moment, I think I do have a picture of Joe's. So, this is one where I've got 2 different transducers on there. Okay, this transducer is mounted in scout mode. So instead of being vertical, it's horizontal, okay? And this is on that Camus. And how in the hell, okay, put in this hand, then I'll talk, okay? But anyway, so again, the other thing I had to do is that you notice that this transducer here, which is the forward-facing one, which is in the wrong position. It's rotated about 90 degrees out, and actually 180 out. It's actually a little bit higher off the trolling motor body itself. Normally you do about 6 to 7 inches, okay? If you have it any closer than that, you'll see in your signal the trolling motor body. It'll just basically block off part of your image, okay? Yeah, if you have it up too high, there's a good chance you'll be out of water. Not that your trolling motors ever bounce out of the water when you're in waves. It happens. So the idea is to keep it as close to the trolling motor head as possible, but so it stays underwater, okay? So, all right. Okay, pole mounts. And turns out Joe Fonzie was telling me there's actually the guy with Brew City mounts here with a really, really good price on it. It's a manual mount. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. But there's lots of options, and this is probably the hottest part of the market other than the live transducers, okay? How do you mount these things? There's some new shaft mount designs. There's a ton of pole mount designs and stuff. I'll just show you a few of them. And actually, these are ones that I have personal experience with. So first thing you want to do is how do you want to mount it to your boat, okay? Most of them are mounted on the trolling motor, usually attached to the head. And so it's up, everything's up front, okay? But you can also put it on your tracks, rails. I call them rails, you guys call them tracks. It's the little, C-channel that's on the side of your boat. And that's what we'll be putting on Joe's boat next week. So the other thing is that you want to go motorized, you want to go manual. I think you can get that Brew City right now here at the show for a little less than $400, or you can get the motorized version. And motorized versions, you can go from $1,000 up to $2,000 if you want. But to me, having it motorized, having a remote control, and having the foot pedals is kind of critical using these things. Because now what I'll do is as I'm fishing, I got this remote control hanging right here, and I can just start it and stop it as I want. Okay. So this is the Brew City mount. This is mounted on a rail on the bow. Come on, geez Louise. I don't think there's an operation to make your fingers skinny, is there? So anyway, but like I say, it locks into the rail itself and just hangs off the side of the boat. If you want to steer it, you use the handle and you steer it around. Okay. It's a very simple system. It's nothing really to go wrong with it other than if you leave it in the water and take off, you may cause some damage somewhere. So, seriously, there you go. Okay, so that's what the pole shaft itself looks like, and they actually send it with the Hawkins components, which I was very happy when I saw that. So that's a manufacturer that understands. Okay, and this is what it looks like when it's stowed on the boat. Right now in this stow, I've got the transducer forward on it. Personally, I just did that because we're sitting in the garage over there. It's just somewhere on the island in a car dealership, which gave me great place to work. But I would stow this so your transducer is away from the direction you're heading. Protect your transducer, okay? They're expensive, they cost a bit, so, okay. This is Joe's boat when I was working on the Cabela's a couple years ago. And this is a live sweep setup. And the transducer is obviously on this pole, and this is the pole mounting to the trolling motor head. Okay. So, and because the way the Altera type trolling motors work, we had to use that coiled cable to move it back and forth. In fact, what we did is we took the old coiled cable he had from the old mount and used it on that, and we just kept the new one in a box. So, yeah, there's a bunch of tools laying on the deck, and that's what happens, excuse me, when you install. What the heck? There we go. Okay, this is a pole mount mounted on the Ultrix. The mount is back here. Okay, trolling motor's on the shaft here. I think this was an older version. We replaced the factory live scanner or active target mount with one that the live scanner has that actually attaches to the end of their pole, and it creates a much more compact arrangement. But the one thing you want to be extremely careful of, and I think the next picture will show that. Yeah, over here. When you get this thing installed, you're going to have to tweak the installation, the vertical height, the distance away from your trolling motor, because you really don't want to hit your blade into the transducer. Okay? Most of the times you will just nick your blade, which at least frustrates the crap out of me because my Ghost, if I get a nick on my blade, it's just vibrating like crazy. Okay? But you don't want to have the transducer hitting anything as it's rotating around. So it's got to have free clearance. So the way I test it out, I'll deploy the trolling motor. I'll run that manually back and forth with the remote control first, make sure I'm not hitting anything. Then I'll take the trolling motor, run that trolling motor back and forth or get somebody else to run the trolling motor back and forth to make sure it's going to clear everything. And then I'll set that thing in auto sweep mode and just let it go and have someone run the trolling motor, make sure I'm not hitting anything. Okay, so very, very important for that. The other thing is, again, with the alignment with this, to align this transducer to the arrow on the pole mount itself, I've used things like a piece of drop shot line. Joe had one laying in his boat, surprise. So we just taped it onto the head, right where the arrow is, and came down the shaft. And they gave me the center point and the alignment line. I've also used like a plumb bob. So again, don't worry about being, 0.1 degrees off. It doesn't matter as long as you know where it is. Okay. And a lot of this stuff is, first off, when you first get live, I don't know, you guys, who has lives? No, you do, Chris. Yeah. Okay. So I know when you got it, you had to train your eye what you're seeing. So now you have to train your eye since you already know what you're looking at, now you can know where you're looking. So learn where you're looking, and you'll be good to go. And then you can go back and do all these laser alignments. I bought some laser tools for it, and it's fun until you accidentally do one of these numbers on your transducer. So now everything's off. This is the remote control for the live scanner. This is the older version. Pretty simple to operate. That live scanner that I have will let you do a sweep back and forth. It'll let you do quadrant sweeps, so I can sweep to the right, sweep to the left. I can also hover on a bait. I forget what they call it. I basically call it a bait quiver, bait lock. So if you say, for example, your school is sitting where that projector is, I can point it to that and it'll oscillate back and forth 5 or 10 degrees. And so if they move slightly, I can always see them. It's a really, really handy feature. Okay. So this is what the pole mount looks like in the water. And you can see my trolling motor is aimed this way. Transducers are aimed 180 degrees away. So, okay. What the? Apparently, there we go. All right. So this is just a short clip video of it running in the water. It's just a slight cycle. You can see the trolling motor is in spot lock or anchor mode. Okay. And you can see it's moving independently of the transducer. The transducer is on a sweep cycle. I think that sweep cycle is the right quadrant sweep. Okay, so very handy, especially say you're running the bank and now you see something. I know that's more of a southern thing, but anyway, if you're not running the bank, if you're out in the middle of the water and you found an area you want to hover in, so you're cruising along looking at the rock lines, okay, and now you stop, put it in spot lock, and now you can set that thing up, have it just sweep and relocate what you're looking at. Okay, these are very handy tools for that. So I got the full video up on my YouTube channel. And this is a transom mount here. This one mounts it in either down mode or forward mode. And the forward mode doesn't shoot as far back because of the way the mount is, but you could easily modify that to shoot further back. But what I have noticed when I've been in the forward mode, because the way these transducers are built, there's actually this array of 3 transducers and they're all angled. I can actually see behind my boat I've got a 22 footer, so I can see 40 feet behind that transducer, which is about 20 feet behind the boat. And it's kind of cool because I was on Champlain one day, I put it in spot lock, I was just looking around, and next thing I saw on the screen, oh, there's a fish 20 feet behind the boat. Threw back there and caught him. You guys can do that, that's kind of cool. Eagle eye, you can't do that because it only has one bank. It only is really from 20 feet in front of the boat at depth, okay? So it's kind of a neat feature. So, yeah, you don't always have to look ahead of yourself, you can look behind, so. But anyway, that's how I mount that. The other thing is I use this mounting block, which I'll talk about in the other class. And that's one of those HPDAs, the high density polyethylene mounts, brackets. And it's basically 3M adhesive on the back. And the nice thing is I'm not drilling into a hull, which I hate drilling into hulls. So okay. What the? Seriously? Okay, so this is one thing you want to do. If you've got this mounted on your trolling motor, and it's going to be there as you're running, if you notice things bounce up and down a lot, get a brace for it, okay? They're about 170, 200 bucks range. It'll save your the grief, because now you're moving the torque further down the shaft, okay? I actually wish that the braces, I could put it all the way down at the bottom near the transducer itself, but unfortunately I haven't found one yet. The other thing is on your trolling motor, you need that loop there. And you can see the Hawkins component there, but I got this loop because this part up here is fixed and this is rotational. Okay. So always put a good size loop in your line. Don't over tighten your cables. So, okay. Wiring. Okay, and this is where, you basically have your transducer cable, okay, pretty obvious. That's a pretty good size connector coming on the end. The Ethernet cable is a lot smaller, and then you got power. So when you're pulling cables, if you're going through all the same hole, put the biggest connectors in first, and then smaller ones. Trust me, it makes life a lot easier when you're pulling cables. So anyway, so you got the transducer, you got the Ethernet cable, but you got power cable, and power is a little different on the Garmin versus on the Lowrance, okay? Yes, they both have a red and they both have a black, and they should be fused. Garmin has a fuse in line. Lowrance, you can get it gives you a fuse holder, but again, I use fuse locks, so I don't use them. But what Lowrance also has a way to wake it up, where Garmin has a wake up components built into their boat network, okay? Units. Lowrance has it separately. And the neat thing about that is if you decide today, I'm not going to use my live sonar, I can just switch it off. Now I've immediately saved a lot of power consumption. And I've immediately gotten rid of a lot of extra sonar signals in the water. Okay? Because you don't always need a live sonar, but it's definitely handy. But one thing that's really cool with the Active Target 2 is they always have the blue wire in the power cord, but now it's real. It's basically a sync cable. So that as I'm running a unit on the bow with, say, side scan, down scan, sonar, and then I'm running my live, if you're running those together, you'll see, especially on Garmin's and on the AT1s, you'll see noise pops from the sonar conflicting with each other. Okay. With the Active Target 2 and a Pro unit, you can actually turn on the sync function, and now this will pulse and this will pulse, but they won't pulse like this, okay? So you'll basically eliminate all that noise. I've got a short video on that, but I'm going to be doing another one as soon as we ever ice out. So, okay, but that's one advantage of the AT2. So, transducer cable. Rule number 1, never ever connect or disconnect that transducer with the power on, ever, unless you have a big stock of them handy, so, and you have unlimited funds. Again, be careful with that cable, and be careful plugging that cable into the connector. Garmin, there we go. This is the Eagle Eye on the left. Those pins are few compared to the Active Target module. Easy to bend those if you put it in and force it. Don't force it in, just put it in gently and then it'll slide right in, okay? Just be careful. I've read where people have actually broken pins off. You break a pin off a module, well, the modules fortunately are only $500. It's not that bad, right? But you break it on your, fortunately, you got a female on this end of the transducer cable. You're not gonna break it on the cable. But if you get a pin stuck in the cable, now you gotta extract it out so you can go to get the next module, so. All right, so just be careful of that. Come on, there we go. This is that yellow wire, this is the wake-up wire, okay? I've seen a lot of people with the active target modules, they power it up, oh, it's all powered up. And then they'll say, did you connect the yellow wire? No. Until you activate it or basically wake it up, it's not gonna work, okay? You have to wake it up. There's a lot of different ways. I got a video on that, it's half an hour long or so. Tells you 5 different ways to do that. And that one's that's actually my top video right now because a lot of people don't understand it. It's a fairly, being from an electrical engineer, it's a simple concept for me, but a lot of people, it's just, why do I need to do that? But the idea is that I want to, like I say, a lot of guys, when they turn the units on, they want the AT to come on and stay on all the time. But if I'm, say, for fishing the Potomac River or Okeechobee or something shallow, I want to turn that module off. Or if I want to save power that day, I just turn it off. If I don't feel like using it, I want to turn it off. By adding a switch, either a dedicated switch or a solid state relay connected in your boat system, that way you can turn it on or off at will, okay? On my boat, and I think I did it on Joe's, I've done it on a lot of boats, I'll use a solid state relay, and you're only switching basically 10, 15 milliamps. It's very, very low current, so you don't have to worry about heat sinking it. If I was switching, say, an audio module that's pulling 5 to 10 amps, then you have to heat sink these. But that low current, you don't have to heat sink it. So, okay. So, what the? Apparently, I must be hitting, never mind. So, the sync wire, okay, this is only on the AT2, and it's only with the HC Pro units, okay? Again, it's basically, you can simulate this function if you don't have the Pro unit and the AT2, you can just stop your sonars, okay? But I like to see everything at once. I like to have my sonar side scan, down scan, and live all running together. And if I don't want to visually filter it, get rid of the noise in the screens where you're getting this spike line, and you've probably seen that if you're running those transducers, then I'll use the sync wire on that module. Okay. And the nice thing is that sync wire, you can also use it for the S3100 module, which is the side scan with the fish reveal on it. Okay, I got that set up on my console unit. I'll be doing a video on that again whenever we get de-iced out here. But again, very handy feature. A lot of people don't use it because they don't understand what it does. I put a short video on that, and it really truly does clean up your signal. The video I did was unfortunate. It was on the St. Lawrence in roughly 8-10 feet of water, heavy grass. And when I turn it on and off, you can see the difference in noise spikes versus grass very easily. So, okay. So this is what it looks like with the sync turned on. Okay. So I'm going, what am I? Not pretty shallow there, very shallow actually. So normally without the sync turned on, you'll see lines, vertical lines all the way up and down. And they'll be regular and you'll see them pulsing. And if you guys already have Livescopes or active targets, you probably have seen those lines what I'm talking about, okay? Unless you turn your other sonars off, stop them. So, I swear I'm hitting there. Whew. Okay, one thing a lot of people don't think about is that when you're trailering, rocks get thrown up. If you've got a glass boat, you probably have chips in your hull. If you have an aluminum boat, you probably have chips in your paint from road crap. Last thing you want to do is get the chips in your transducer from road stuff, okay? Just buy a cheap cover, you know, 10, 15, 20 bucks. It's insurance, okay? Like I say, you might notice I'm slightly anal about stuff, but again, you know, you pay a lot for your equipment, you may as well add a little bit of protection to it, and then that way you don't have to worry about it tomorrow or the day after. So, okay. A little bit on testing. The neat thing is that if you're out of water, if you say put an active target 2 module in scout mode, or you put a Livescope in, was it landscape mode, I think it's called. So if you put them in either the mode, it basically does that horizontal, and you'll actually see noise on the screen. That's a really good test to let you know your module's connected and your transducer's connected. Because you'll get the sweep signal if your module's connected, but if the transducer's not connected, you won't get all the noise signal, you know, the dots all over the screen. But if you got everything connected, you'll see that. And what I've also done in the past is I've had someone walk by the transducer, and you can see them walking by, which is really weird. You know, sitting in the trailer in the garage, and you can see somebody walking around. So anyway, there's a whole bunch on testing on that. But again, I mentioned earlier about clearance testing. Don't let your transducer hit things. Okay. Okay. Network testing. A lot of people have issues with it doesn't show up on the network. There's no source. Lots of issues like that. Again, I did a video on that only because I've seen that issue pop up so many times, and I've helped so many people with it. It's very simple steps you go through. Make sure the unit shows up on the network. Make sure, you know, basically go through a set of steps until you find what your problem is. But the idea is that if you have all your units connected together, you can have your live system on the rail, you can have it on the bow, you can have it wherever, and you can sit it in a unit and see it. And it's fairly handy to be able to do that because you're not always fishing from the front deck, a console area, or wherever. On Joe's boat, what we're going to do is we're going to put another unit on his stern, back on the transom. He's got a short rail he's putting there, or trax unit. So Joe will actually have 5 units on his boat, which is, I guess, he's getting close. With that boat, he's getting closer to a crappie boat. I don't know if you've seen some crappie boats with like 8 units on it and 3 or 4 live systems, and they go bananas. So anyway, if you go to my YouTube channel, this is the channel itself. I'd appreciate it if you guys subscribe for me. Thank you, Chris. I know you already have. I'm trying to get to my magic 1,000, and it's been a long road. But anyway, but there's a bunch of troubleshooting videos. So there's a bunch of install videos. I've got several Luns in there. I got several V-hulls. I got a 620. I got Joe's 621, and then I'll have his 622 probably in about 2 or 3 weeks up once we get that job done. But I've got a lot of bass boats and smaller boats in there as well. And it'll give you an idea on how you want to rig stuff, okay, and then how you test. If you have Lowrance units and you've seen the word there's global and local variables, you don't know what the heck they are, there's a video on that too. When I was researching that to see what videos are available, there's like one video on it from Lowrance about 8 years ago when they first announced that feature. Nothing since then. So, but it helps you clarify. Well, I pull my trolling motor up, and now I don't read depth anymore. How come? Okay, little things like that. So anyway, come on. I know this is not a capacitance thing. So lots of resources around here, lots of training classes, lots of YouTube videos. Mine's just one. There's a whole bunch of others. I typically don't look at other people's videos only because I get frustrated if I watch one and I know that they don't know what they're talking about. So, and that's just the engineer in me. So, and Chris can attest with me. We fished the river out here a few times. So, anyway, questions.
can run your transducer in the air? I thought it had to be cooled by the water.
You can run it in the air for a limited amount of time, okay? Just be careful. I will say that what I do for a tournament day, I'll start everything up, get it going, and I'll run, well, if I'm running out of Messina, I've got an hour run, okay? I'll run it out of water for an hour. I did some testing with that Skeeter I had where I mounted the module in their locker, and after 8 hours it was overheating, so it got intermittent. So I moved it out from that locker out onto the console to get better airflow, right? And so what I did is I started measuring the temperature. I used an infrared heat gun, thermometer, measured it, and watched the temperature rise. So in order to get a good cycle, I let it run for about 2.5 hours in the house with everything running. Just
The transducer.
no, the transducer was hanging out of the water. It was dry. Just don't do it as normal practice. Okay. So these newer transducers are not quite like the older. The older transducers, basically because they're all crystal driven, they had lifetime of what, 3, 4, 5 years, and after a while you notice your signal is getting worse and worse and worse. These new transducers are a little bit different internally, so it's more solid state stuff. So, okay. But again, not a good idea too. But or what you can do is have your unit as one thing you could do to make sure you're not doing that. When you before you power your unit off the next time, stop the live sonar, okay? And then when it powers back up, it'll be stopped. And then you get to where you're going, drop it in the water, and then turn it back on. That's one good way to keep that. You know, if you want to be really concerned about that. So, but I haven't, like I say, I haven't seen an issue. And that's running way up and down the St. Lawrence River when I didn't want to. So, because I'm seeing it just, it's like a vacuum, shall we say, if you know what I mean. So, anyway, so more questions? Okay. Well, thanks for showing up. I appreciate it. Okay. All right, thank you. Hey, and the camera didn't die this time, which is a good thing. Yeah. Ah, whoa, that's bright. Okay. Ah.